And well, let's move on then to the Arab winter.
Well, if you looked at the news feeds this morning, Mike, this is pretty shocking. This is a big story. This is in Iraq. So we're looking at scenes here from the holy city of Karbala in Iraq. This is mainly a Shiite-dominated area in southern Iraq. And these are protesters attacking the Iranian consulate in a Shiite area of Iraq. Now, this is pretty amazing. So who is happy about this? Well, let's take a look. And now we have reports here from Al Jazeera, 3 killed as Iraqi protesters attack the Iranian consulate in Karbala. And you can be sure that this man is very, very chuffed right now. This is Mike Pompeo, again, U.S. Secretary of State. And what he's saying here is the dream of Washington and Israel and the State Department and all the neocons, basically a potential split between Iran and Iraq. So what are they doing? Who is fomenting these protests, Mike? And this is definitely an Arab winter of sorts. These are the scenes right here, right outside of the Iranian consulate in Karbala. You can see crowds of people, and we look a little closer and see what the protesters, they're carrying an Iraqi flag at the top. So there is a bit of national, the bit of patriotism they're injecting in here on the street level. Now, I think if you probably drill down really close and look closer, and maybe we'll find out in the future who's behind these protests. This isn't a natural reaction here in a mainly Shiite-dominated area to be attacking an Iranian facility. They're meant to be close allies, certainly from a religious, social, cultural level, very close. So it doesn't seem like a natural fit. This is coming right on sort of the heels of these comments here. And this is arguably one of the most powerful men in Iraq. Okay, this is the Grand Ayatollah al-Sistani. And this is what he said. He said, Iraq must not be influenced by any regional or international actor. The question is, who is he referring to? He left it very vague here. And some of those protesters will interpret that as Iran being a regional actor, okay? More likely, I think he's probably referring to the United States and their allies in the region. Namely, I would say Saudi Arabia. You could also put Qatar in that basket as well, and perhaps a few others, certainly Israel, but that goes without saying. But it's interesting how it's possible that some of these words, because he was so vague, it's been slightly misconstrued maybe by some of the protesters or by some people, but played on by people who would like to see this division and accentuated by people who want to see this division. So keep an eye on Iraq. This is very important. Iraq still remains the most important Middle Eastern country, separating Iran from Middle East proper and from the Gulf. So this is why the U.S. attacked it so viciously from the 1990s to the early 2000s, because it wanted to subdue it, it wanted to break it up, split it, dismember it, disempower it. And so we're seeing the results of this now. You're not seeing this in the analysis, Mike, which is the United States destroyed Iraq. They destroyed it, they dismembered it. They're still picking up the pieces from the U.S., and Britain played a crucial role as well in that. And that doesn't come into any of this analysis. It's being marketed as the Arab Spring or protests in Iraq, and what are they protesting? They're protesting a lack of public services, no infrastructure, no money, corruption, lack of anything you can imagine. That's a direct result of the U.S. and the U.K.'s war and occupation of that country. And they tore the Kurdistan region away from that country as well, and pretty much took a lot of the revenue that they used to get from oil in those areas went as well with the Kurdish regional government. The U.S. backed that 100%. So they tried to do the same in Syria, if you notice, to create another Kurdish regional government to tear away and take the energy away. Like I said before, what's happening in Syria is a smaller scale version of what the U.S. and its partners already did in Iraq years before. So they try to repeat the formula, if you will, in Syria. So let's continue with the Arab winter, Mike. This is very, very important here. Lebanon is by many people's estimation, the bellwether of the Middle East. And the president, this is from a few days ago, called for a new government. This is after the resignation of Hariri, the prime minister, resigned amidst weeks of protests, protesters demanding for reforms, sweeping reforms in the government. And now this is President Michel Aoun here, basically calling for a new government of technocrats to push economic reforms. Lebanon's coming off a 2-week bank holiday. Imagine the banks being shut for 2 weeks to prevent a run on the banks, a potential collapse in currency. There are a few rays of light, a few rays of hope. The Lebanese dollar bonds were up for the first time in weeks, just in the last few days. So clearly there's some rescue packages working behind the scenes, Mike. But what are we talking about here? Technocrats. And what does that generally translates into? Bankers. And if you have any questions there, ask Italy, Mario Monti.
Or Greece.
Or Cyprus. They know exactly what technocrats are. Now, to be clear, though, it is not just bankers when we're talking about technocrats. There's other experts that they're going to be drafted in, not just bankers, but also people to help. It looks like there's a will, possibly, Mike, we're seeing the first steps of Lebanon going away from its sectarian government structure, which is the confessional system that requires people from different religions and sects to hold certain posts and restricts voting and electoral activity by sectarian sect or religious bodies and affiliations, okay? So we could be seeing a transition out of that for Lebanon the first time in over 70 years. That's major in terms of it could be an Arab nationalist republic that could sprout out of this, or it could go in another direction towards civil war. Again. So, but here's really what you should be focusing on. This is what the press are pushing right now in the Western press. Shiite are being treated like traitors. Lebanon protesters angry with Hezbollah. So the U.S.'s goal here is to try to isolate Hezbollah. They've made no secrets about that. Again, Mike Pompeo made those statements publicly. They want to sanction the allies of Hezbollah. In other words, they don't want Hezbollah in government. The U.S. wants to isolate them and sort of keep them from being in coalition, being in government in coalition, or So the U.S., that's their main goal. That's Israel's goal, is to isolate Hezbollah politically and financially and eventually militarily. But they can't do that until they cut them off politically. And to do that, they're going to have to hurt Lebanon as well, to divide Lebanon, because Hezbollah are very popular in Lebanon. And so that civil war possibility is still a threat if you look at U.S. outside interference and what they want for their country. This is a country the size of Wales, but it's strategically incredibly important. So the United States is vying for influence with Iran and with other regional actors. Of course, Saudi Arabia is very influential in Lebanon and the Gulf. It's a clearinghouse for so much money in Beirut. But so I think it's very important how this story is going to develop. Keep an eye on how the government forming in Lebanon is coming together or not. That's going to give you an indication of where the region might be going in the next year or two.